Dyalog APL can be started just like any other application. You've got an icon on the desktop and it comes up with an application. The first thing that you will notice is that there's a large white space that makes up for 90% of the space or more. This is your session log. This is where everything happens. Everything that you type in here is answered by APL and appears in the session log. You can have several things that you can be typing and APL records it. You can see that what you type is indented. What APL answers is right on the left margin. This is easier to figure out what you've typed and what has been answered. You can go back in the session log and retrieve lines. For example, I can go back here and retrieve this line here. I can also use the keyboard shortcuts. For example, Ctrl-Shift-Backspace will bring me the first line, the second line, and if I try the third line, well, this is what I started with, and then if I try again, then it won't want to. It tells me that it can't do it, which makes sense. So I can execute that line again, and here we go. I could go forward by using Ctrl-Shift-Enter and so on. There's a number of keystrokes that are used in shortcuts. There's a menu, just like any Windows application, where you can do most standard things. There is also a toolbar for the most common things. All this is configurable. Everything is kept in a session file, which you can reload, so you can have several sessions if you want, depending on what type of work you do. So this is the development environment. You can customize it at will. So I'll go briefly over the menus and the toolbar at the same time. So we have File, which allows you to bring in save as, and also it shows you the previous things that you had been doing, and plus some other things that are not applicable in this case here. You've got the Edit that shows you cut, copy, paste, what I said before, back and forward to go into the session log, using the keyboard keys, where you can see now that you can do it through the menu also. The cut, copy, and paste are a little bit special because they use the original control keys for cut, copy, and paste. Since then, Windows community has adopted new control keys for doing copy, cut, and paste in Control X, Control V, and Control C. But APL has kept the original control sequences to do these tasks. View allows you to see or not see the various toolbars. Windows, there's none at the moment. Session, this is what I was saying before. If you have several sessions, you can either save or save as, or open a previous session in which you would have set up all your menu items and you would have configured your session. The log allows you to bring in a log that you would have previously, presumably previously saved. For example, if I want to save my log now, I can save it and I can come back later and bring it. APL will by default bring you the standard log when it opens up, so that you can see what you did before, and it will save when you exit what you've been doing. But you can change that if you want to. Actions, edit, trace, execute, copy, paste. These are standard things that that are usually better done through the keyboard, using the keyboard keys. Options, this one, configure, is an important one. Let's try that. Configure is where you want to customize all the little things in APL. For example, if you want to show line numbers in your functions, this is where you do it. If you want to set your workspace size, maximum workspace size, in this Windows version you're limited to 2 gig because this is a 32-bit version, but on the 64-bit version there's almost no limit. This is where you specify where you're going to be loading workspaces when you don't specify a full path. In other words, if I just say load ABC, it's going to be looking into these areas there. So, for example, if this is also where lib will show you where it gets its library. So, for example, if I look at this, you can see that library shows me not all of them because some of them were empty, but it shows me all the workspaces that I can load from these folders which were mentioned here. So if you want to modify that, let's say that you've got some area where you're going to be saving all your workspaces, you would put it here. Just add a new one. For example, I could put ABC, and then I would add it, and it would appear in my list there. I could remove this one here, and so on and so on. The windows, this is where you specify where your windows start. At the moment, this one is going to the editing and tracing window. They're all both going to be starting on the upper left corner. You may want to change that if you want to. This is where you set your quad IO printing precision and so on. Usually you don't touch that, but you could. The most important thing here is the auto PW. That means that your quad PW will change depending on the size of your session. So if you resize your session, it will, let me give you an example. If I do, for example, let's see the width of this window, and if I say quad PW APL has decided it was 126, so after 126 characters it will fold. Well, let's verify that. Let's say 130 reshape of quad D being the characters 0 to 9, so you can see that it folds at 126 including the 0 on the left, and then there's 4 more characters. So that makes sense. If I bring the window a little bit to the back, to the left, and then try again this line, you can see now that it's been folded at 66. Makes sense. 65 with a 0, 66, and then it's folded. So quad PW has changed just because I resized the window. Options. Let's go back there for a second. Trace and edit. We've got this is where you decide where you trace and edit windows, how they're going to be behaving, and probably the only thing you want to change here is put it into the classic dialog mode. Otherwise what happens is that the windows are docked into your session. So if you look here, and if I were to if I want to edit ABC, for example, ABC's got its own window, which is fine, but if I were to say configure, use the non-classic mode, and then I were to edit this function again, then you can see that it stays. This removes some of your real estate. Escape will exit the editor. The salt, if you know what salt is, this is where you set it up, and that's it. One of the more interesting things is in the tools, it's Explorer, which you can also get with this menu item here. Explorer is more like a disk explorer facility. It allows you to see what's in your workspace, functions, variables, and everything. In this workspace, the workspace is clear. It's clear workspace, so there's nothing in it. So you can look into the root namespace, the main namespace, and there's nothing in it. So let's load a workspace here. Let's shift escape to cancel this line and load Conga, which I know is in my library there. Now if we go back to this window, you can see that there is a lot of things that have been loaded into the workspace, and if I look, I can see that although there are no functions and variables, and we can verify that here, functions and variables is empty. Control tab, well, that doesn't work here. Alt tab brings me back here. You can see that this namespace here contains functions and variables. I can change the display, and I can double click on client, and I can see what client looks like. The same thing with it's got variables. I can have a look at the variable right here. So it's a very handy tool that allows you to see everything in the workspace. If you can look here, we have a class. The definition of the class appears on the right. I've got another workspace here, namespace here. I have another namespace here, and you can see what's in it, and so on and so on. This is probably the most interesting tool you will find in the Dialog APL. And these were the most interesting thing in the Dyalog APL environment, development environment. To exit, you can use the button here or the good old